Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another astrological report. This is for July 8 through July 14 of 2025. I hope you're doing well. So this week, we're looking at two main events going on up in the sky. And the first one is the moon culminating in Capricorn. So the Capricorn full moon will be exact on Thursday, July 10. And that full moon is rolled by Saturn, and Saturn is not moving all week long. It's officially stationing retrograde on Saturday, July 12th, but I look at it as stationary all week long. So everything about Saturn is really amplified this week. So those are the two main events, and other than that, it's basically just lunar aspects all week long. Besides the sun here, the sun is also connected to the nodes of fate exact on Friday, July 11. Plus the moon right now is T-squared the nodes of fate. So we still have fateful things happening this week, which will have a long-term effect on the future. And the culmination of the moon in Capricorn is definitely pretty important for the world and where the world is at this point, and a lot of government stuff that is going to be a part of this week. So a lot of worldly stuff, as the moon here is at the top of the chart now. The moon is going to be waxing through the rest of Sagittarius, reaching that fullness in Capricorn, like I said. And the only conjunction the moon will make this week is to Pluto in Aquarius. And we know what Pluto is in Aquarius. It's this intensity with the group and the community in a lot of ways. Also science and technology, and I'll talk more about it, but Pluto's intense and powerful and transformative. And when the moon reaches that, it's not always easy. So the moon will go through Aquarius, and then the moon will also be ingressing Pisces at the end of this week. So we also have Mercury slowing down. It's going to be getting really slow towards the end of this week as well. It's already slowing down, but it's officially going to go retrograde next week. So really, that's all we have going on. But I think the full moon is going to be a pretty powerful event. It doesn't look like the worst full moon I've ever seen. So it could be a lot worse. And I definitely think the energetics don't look as serious as last week. We did see that crisis event on the 4th of July, which made a lot of sense based on the astrology. I think when it comes to the flooding is definitely reflective of Neptune stationing retrograde. Obviously, I've talked about storms and flood events a lot with Neptune, but it was also not just that. That was the bigger picture of it, but then also the moon coming into Scorpio, squaring Pluto, and then all those other difficult aspects on the 4th. The astrology was kind of reflecting that was a tough day, and we did see that, obviously. We did see a lot of explosions as well, a lot of fireworks explosions, and then we did see a gas explosion at a gas station in Rome on the 4th of July as well. So that day did turn out to be pretty difficult overall, and there's definitely some difficult moments in here throughout the week again, but in a full moon, still, everything is like it's peak emotional energy that's coming to a head this next few days. So, there's still some stuff that could pop off here, but I think it has a lot to say this week about government and the worldly restructuring kind of really showing in big ways. Obviously, we also have this Uranus coming into Gemini. So we're here. We're in this minor grand trine with all the outer planets, including Saturn as well. And it's a glimpse of the future. And it's kind of like the beginning of a really big new era for the world. Now, we really are at the cusp of great changes for the world and society. We're not going to just always recognize it instantly, though. I mean, this is one of those times in history that when we look back at it, we're going to see that this was the turning point into a really powerful new reality for the world. But when we're living it, it's not always noticeable because, a couple years, these things take, several years to really show the biggest changes. We're in the process of it. And when we're living it day to day, it's not always recognizable in the biggest way that it is in hindsight years later. But I'm telling you, based on astrology, this is one of the biggest turning points, probably for our lifetime for sure. But it's going to change the world. Everything that's shaping up for the next several years is going to change the world in some of the biggest ways in history. And that's what all these outer planets now are showing. It's just that they're still early in this process and we're not seeing all the results just yet. So we really have to accept that, people that are fighting change, I guess it's part of the process, but it's futile. Change is unstoppable and it's on a worldly level. And a lot of that is kind of coming out and being seen and being felt in big ways this week with this Capricorn full moon ruled by Saturn stationing on the world point with Neptune, and this Uranus in Gemini. So yeah, it's a crazy new world. And we're going to have to accept it and get used to it. All right, now Mercury's slowing down. It's kind of slow this week. And we'll be stationing retrograde by next week. Mars is also getting pretty close to the nodes of fate at this point. So that's still kind of a fateful territory. And, this is also eclipse territory once we get to September. That there's still a lot of fateful things that will be happening, like I said, that will have a pretty long-term effect on the future overall. But, it's still, there's not it's just mostly emotional stuff in this week, as far as I can see here. But I'll go through the chart like I always do day by day, and we'll check it all out and get a better feel for every moment throughout the week. All right, so starting here on Tuesday, on July 8th, the moon is at the last 10 degrees of Sagittarius, so it's a big energy, big mood, big feelings, and the moon is being ruled by Jupiter, which comes down to Cancer, the foundation, safety, security, homes and families, strong emotions. The moon does have a mutual reception with Jupiter as it's going through Sagittarius. So they're working in big ways together. So it really has this strong connection to Cancer, and the moon is ruling all this. It's all about feelings and emotions and sensitivities, plus the sun going through here. And this is a part of the full moon energy building up as well between the public life, the future, and I'll talk more about the full moon, of course. But the spotlight is on safety, security, comfort, home and family, property, and all this inner stuff that's really amplified with the sun next to Jupiter here. So the moon going through Sagittarius is going to really overly amplify a lot of emotions and feelings, generally speaking, for people. Moon typically is more positive mood in Sagittarius that wants to be more outward, more adventurous, more philosophical, have faith and belief in things. So that could be the case for some people as well. And of course, Sagittarius, it deals with cultural issues, deals with higher education, wisdom and knowledge and truth. What is truth? That's another big thing that's kind of peaking in a way right now because the moon has a lot of light on it already building to that full moon. So there's a lot of consciousness about Sagittarius coming out all day today and into tomorrow as well. And so what is truth? What is real? What is not real? So this comes back to a lot of worldly stuff as well about truth and belief and things. And those things are very fateful because the moon is T-squaring the nodes of fate right now, first thing today on Tuesday. So the world is at a little bit of a crossroads, a fateful crossroads that will have an effect on the future for good or bad, or things that are happening right now. We're at this crossroads about decisions around truth and belief and faith in certain things. Sagittarius also deals with traveling and being more outward. But again, it comes right back to more inward vibes as well around the need for safety and security. And, with this now Uranus being in Gemini, communication is going to get more and more radical. Media is going to get more and more radical and changeable and scattered. And the streets are going to get a little more chaotic from this point forward with Uranus in Gemini. So a lot more volatility, generally speaking, in the world in different ways as Uranus is now in Gemini. And that Uranus in Gemini is being ruled by Mercury, which is slowing down in Leo, very dramatic around communications and information. But also in this process that we're going to start to kind of be stuck in the same area that's been highlighted by the mind over this last couple weeks. We're going to revisit those areas as Mercury goes retrograde next week and starts moving backwards towards those earlier degrees that we've already experienced. But for now, the moon here in Sagittarius, like I said, it's a fateful day for whatever happens, for good or bad. And basically, that's just the main aspect for today is the moon T-squared the nodes of fate. So I would consider it a fateful day all day long. The moon also does eventually make a trine down to Chiron in Aries. But Chiron is also going to be activated more and more after this full moon as well. And, a lot of people talk about Chiron as healing, and maybe that can be the case for some people. But it activates a lot of difficult things, injuries, accidents, wounds, sensitivities, vulnerabilities, just a lot of deeper things that are difficult that the world is also going through that are being highlighted with the trine from the moon, the circumstances and the feelings and the mood connecting to it. But it can also add to a certain amount of better confidence sometimes. When there's easy aspects to Chiron, it can help people feel better about themselves sometimes. So just, as the moon is going through Sagittarius, it's more indulgent for good or bad. Things are just bigger than normal. Circumstances tend to be overinflated for good or bad. People making strong emotional statements about things for good or bad. And that continues all day long for Tuesday. But it's still, a lot of things come back to the homeland, to the inner life and feelings and home and family stuff, property stuff, real estate stuff, generally speaking. All right, I'm going to move this forward. The moon's going through that all day and then makes that trine to Chiron, like I said, later on tonight. Before the moon changes signs, which is going to be in the overnight hours of Wednesday on July 9. So July 9, early morning hours, the moon reaches that critical degree at 29 Sagittarius, and the first change will be the ingress of Capricorn. And this is where, right as the moon comes into Capricorn, early morning hours of Wednesday morning, it's full moon vibes from this point forward. Full moon will be exact, like I said, on Thursday, but because it's in the sign of the full moon and there's a lot of light on the moon at this point, again, things are really starting to peak and come to a head. Now, as the moon comes into Capricorn, it's a whole different mood. Things get much more serious. Plus, like I said, with Saturn on the world point, very amplified and very powerful, that becomes even stronger now as the moon comes into Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. So let's follow the trail real quick. As the moon comes into Capricorn, where the mood, the circumstances are now, it's ruled by Saturn in Aries, stationing retrograde, super amplified for worldly events and government stuff happening, I think, from this point forward. But then Saturn in Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars is in Virgo, getting super close to the South Node, also fateful points here. And then Mars in Virgo is ruled by Mercury in Leo, which is really slow at this point, preparing to station retrograde by next week. But Mercury in Leo is ruled by the Sun in Cancer, and then the Sun in Cancer is being ruled by this moon, where everything's starting to culminate between the outer world and the inner world. So this is also the beginning of more cardinal energy now. We have a lot of cardinal energy going on with Sun and Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn stationing with Neptune on the world point of Aries, and now the moon starting to culminate in Capricorn. So Capricorn is definitely a powerful sign, and a lot of things start to show. A lot of activity starts to happen, but it's usually a difficult moon phase as the moon is going through Capricorn. It's considered a debilitated moon. And not only that, but as the moon comes into its debilitation with a lot of light on it, with full moon vibes starting to peak, it's squaring Saturn and Neptune. and it's building the opposition to Jupiter. So it's basically a cardinal T-square, one of the most powerful aspects in astrology that shows that there's an inner drive to be taking action, to making things happen, and for overall changes that are going to start to show. But it's uncomfortable typically. It's like when the moon comes into Capricorn, it's more of a serious, drier mood. It's a little more difficult to express things in more of like a fun, happy-go-lucky outward way, although we still have Mercury and Leo, the way people are communicating, which is rolling this Gemini side with Venus and Uranus. So there's still this like separate side in the world going on that's more dramatic, around media and communications and social media, and the more the things happening out in the streets are going to be more dramatic from this point forward. But the moon, the comfort level, the feelings of things, the circumstances are at odds with that. As you can see, as soon as the moon comes into Capricorn, it has that in conjunction, that green line here, to this fresh new Uranus in Gemini that we've never experienced before. So again, there's a kind of having to make a lot of adjustments between these two areas of life. The mind, the mental stimulation, the radical thinking, radical ideas that people are wanting to take action on. It's a little different than just a normal Gemini, Uranus in Gemini, because we have this Aries going on with this new world that says action, making things happen, initiating things. So it's about initiating radical new ideas and thoughts that people are having out in the world. And a lot of that can be expressed through media, social media, and communications and things out on the streets that are more chaotic in that way and more dramatic because it's being ruled by Mercury and Leo. So we're having to make a lot of adjustments between being more mature, more serious, more professional versus this more radical, revolutionary type vibe that's going to start coming in for the world from this point forward. And there's been examples of, there is a part of this new world that is developing. Things are building up to this culmination and turning point in the world around immigration and tourism and this distortion of purity, basically. And that had a lot to say about Neptune in transit through Pisces for those 14 years, which distorted everything and dissolved away the purity of everything, and everything got mixed up, and there was a lack of boundaries in these big ways around the world, affecting all the mutable signs in so many different ways. And Pisces and Sagittarius deals with immigration and traveling and tourism, and you're starting to see a lot of people around the world in different countries kind of getting fed up with the big changes that are taking place by the blending of everybody coming to their homelands, and it affects the housing costs and the cost of living in general, and just taking away the quality of life for locals in different places around the world. The USA is obviously kind of leading this charge of putting up boundaries now, that Saturn is talking about as it came into Pisces to meet up with this Neptune, to say that, no, we just can't have this chaos kind of vibe of everything is one. There's stricter boundaries that are trying to be had, and it's going to be spreading around the world eventually, where there is going to be consequences for what's been happening for years and building up for years. Now, I'm just the messenger, so don't get mad at me for anybody that doesn't like that. I'm not in charge. I'm just reporting on what the astrology is reflecting about all that, and we're seeing that in reality. We even saw Mexico City having a little bit of a riot, and Mexicans pissed off at the gringos, wanting them to get out of their city as well. And it's not just there. I've seen it all around different countries. If you look at Europe is, it's very much overrun now in a way that's, again, cultures have been losing their purity, because of these mutable signs being affected by that long era of Neptune in Pisces. So that's part of the era that's coming to an end. And now with Uranus in Gemini, Uranus is affecting all of the mutable signs now. It's in Gemini, but it's square to Pisces now. It's opposing Sagittarius now, and it's squaring this Uranus now. So now the consequence is a revolutionary turning point for all those things that those four signs rule, which are many different things around the world, including education, beliefs about things, wisdom and knowledge, health, the health industry, traveling and immigration, like I said, and tourism and transportation. That's going to be one of the radical things that I mentioned last week that's going to start coming in as well. A lot of people don't realize it, but there's been a lot of companies for years that have been developing new technology for transportation, including, drones that carry people, flying cars. These things are already here and have been tested and are being tested, and they're going to be coming out more and more. And then other forms of new travel and transportation, and just a lot of new technology is also a part of this new era. So things are going to get more radical now and more likely to change in bigger ways, because Uranus in Taurus for all these years was kind of more sluggish in the revolutionary vibes. And now that it's coming out of Taurus and into Gemini, things are easily changing now. But it's still a transition from the old world into the new world for this next year, as I've said many times, until we get to 2026 and everything is fully in these new positions. And then we're going to see more and more revolutionary changes for the world, in a lot of different ways. But you have to know, people are getting fed up around the world in a lot of ways where we just have, nothing is sacred anymore. And it's on some of the lowest levels to the biggest levels, even on a small level. For example, somebody in their hometown that used to have a hometown swimming hole that was like a sacred place for them. Well, now it's like everybody's, the internet, all these social media influencers have put everything across the internet. So now nothing is private anymore. Everybody knows about everything and visits everything, and everything is overrun by the world now, and that's going to show consequences as time goes on. We're not seeing it all just yet. I'm telling you, it's a part of a radical new world that can show radical things that people do to revolt against these kind of things that are building up. The world, it's pretty crowded, actually. The world isn't as small. It's just, it's overrun by everybody. And, that's just the way it is, at this point. But it's also going to show a lot of radical changes in those ways. So I'm telling you guys, these are the type of events that do lead to some pretty big world events, including just changes in borders, with the Saturn on the world point, and new forms of boundaries that are going to be built and structured over the next few years and beyond. And I think that as the moon comes into Capricorn, there's a sense about this worldly vibe and how the world is feeling about things. But it's also about government stuff that's starting to come in now as the moon is ingressing Capricorn for the next few days and coming full here. It has a lot to say about government, worldly things culminating, and that can also be about, well, I'll talk more about that when we get to Thursday here for the full moon part, but it's kind of starting now. So it's also about work, and responsibilities are going to be really highlighted this week. As Saturn is stationing, Saturn is more powerful than normal. So it's all about everything that Saturn rules, things about responsibilities, commitments, duties, obligations, where you stand with those things. We're at a turning point, generally speaking, especially in government worldly topics about laws, rules, systems, structures that have been building over the last 6 months, because we had a Capricorn new moon 6 months ago, and everything that's been developing for the last half of a year is now coming to a head and a turning point and a culmination point, really, of, rules and laws that have been changing, and the structures and the systems of society in the world and different governments, different countries are going to really start to be more and more visible of where we stand at this point for everybody. But it can also be on a personal level, our own sense of responsibilities and work, and where we stand with our outer life, where we stand with goals and ambitions, and have we accomplished certain things in the last 6 months individually, personally, and it's also building up, a lot of tension between these three areas of life: Aries, Capricorn, and Cancer. So we're looking at the self. The self is also going through a lot of major changes. Our individuality, our freedom, and our independence, and how we feel about that, and what we need to do to create more freedom, more independence for the future. Remember, Saturn always deals with long-term stuff. In the short term, Saturn can sometimes be more restrictive and limiting around whatever sign it's in. And so freedom, Aries, independence. There's sacrifices that are taking place in the short term for greater freedom and independence for the long term. But there's a lot of work that has to be done about the self and our individuality and who we are as people, that has to go through changes. So there's the self that's really being amplified this week. But then we have our responsibilities, things that we have to be doing, our work, and what we have to do to stay alive and to keep going in life. That's on more of a mature, responsible level. But then we have the need for safety and security. And we have home and family matters and property stuff that's also going to be really big and amplified this week. So it's like all three of these areas are pulling on each other. Now, I think overall, Libra is also going to be affected, our relationships in different ways, but that's the least of the concerns during this time of the year is relationships, especially now that the ruler of Libra, Venus, is next to Uranus in Gemini. It's like that's the least, generally speaking. There's exceptions, of course, always based on your own personal transits, but the most important thing is more about the self, home and family, where you live, safety, security, and your work and your responsibilities for the future. All right, so now this moon phase typically shows people have to work harder to feel more comfortable. It's not as easy. And usually it's about when you're responsible, when you're mature, when you're punctual and have a higher level of morality to do what's right, which what's right is subjective, of course, but what you feel is right, that can give you a better sense of feeling more safe and secure and comfortable within this particular moon phase. But there is going to be some issues as the moon comes into Capricorn and squaring Saturn and Neptune. And the opposition building from Jupiter is just going to show that things are still very, very much amplified on a world level here in different ways. So, again, things just get more serious, a little more heavy from this point forward. Well, I think that's already been in the background, but this is just a new level of it. And like I said, having to make a lot of adjustment to media and communications and information with the quincunx. And then, the next aspect will be the moon squaring Saturn, which all this will happen pretty early in the morning, but it'll set the tone for the rest of the day. So moon square Saturn, moon square Neptune. That'll be first thing in the morning, and it can be heavy. It can be a sense of something more restrictive or feeling limited or feeling weighed down and burdened by something. But yet the Neptune factor is also kind of bringing up scandalous conspiracy things on a government world level. Again, trying to figure out what's real and what's not real. Neptune is still very much amplified. There could still be also weather stuff, lingering, flood stuff lingering, the Neptunian vibes. And there's still a certain kind of level of uncertainty and doubts or confusion and not being exactly clear on certain duties and responsibilities or commitments or work stuff, or we're not comfortable with this new, and this can be on local levels, for your own work. So just know, as the moon is coming into Capricorn, it has a lot to say about work. So it's government stuff on the world level, but it's also on a local level, your own work environment, bosses and things, systems and new systems and structures that could be changing in certain work environments. And as the moon comes in here, there could even be some surprises, some unpredictability of changes around work stuff as you come into work on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. no promises that it's going to be for every single person, but that can be a general background vibe, is work stuff that's going through changes. Because on a bigger scale, it's the world going through these big changes around rules and laws and systems and structures. And the moon is bringing it more on a local level as it's coming into Capricorn, reaching culmination. There could also be, I think overall, this is speaking about jobs. And this could say that I think on a world level, this week, whether it be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or even next week, this whole full moon is kind of the main vibe for this whole report week. So it doesn't necessarily have to be right on the full moon, although it could, but it could also suggest that certain people are going to be losing their jobs in some way. It doesn't have to be like it could be like on a bigger level, that we see, but it could also just be individuals. A person might come into their work and they could lose their job or something, or maybe they're ready to quit their job. That comes back to the areas of your own freedom and individuality and what you need and what you want for yourself. It could be at odds with your work, your job, and maybe you need to make a decision about where you stand with work, in some way. Or you could get fired, unfortunately, some people. And I think on a government level, this is going to suggest that certain government employees are going to be losing their jobs. Not like a ton of people, but there's going to be probably certain individuals this week, that there's an announcement that certain government employees are going to resign or get fired or something. And there could even be loss in other ways around government, certain government employees. Now that could be the USA, but this is generally for the world. So it's not just the USA. It can be any kind of government around the world that's going through changes and restructuring in some ways. So it could be at the individuals, like I said, ready to leave their position, or it could be forced upon them, depending. And it's also on more of an individual level too, of like, again, where we stand with certain responsibilities and work and what needs to change, what's coming to a head and a turning point around what you're obligated to, and your work routine and your responsibilities. And it's also about where do you stand at this point with your own personal achievements of the past 6 months or so. Are you still trying to achieve and work towards something that you've been trying to get or get to? Or are things now changing about that? Or have you reached a certain point of success about something and now you're at a turning point for all that? So it can play out in all these different ways. It's kind of the full moon, as well, that will carry over into Thursday, everything that I just talked about. But I think that Wednesday is one of the more challenging days. There's a lot of hard aspects. The moon is also in conjunct to Venus as the day goes on here. And that's where moon in conjunct to Venus, they're on two different pages. They're not working for each other or against each other. It's like two separate areas of life that are happening at the same time. You have this more mentally stimulated, crazy environment type of vibe with Uranus and the Gemini, which again can talk about media still going kind of overly stimulated and radical news and information. There can be a lot of just overall busyness out in the streets and environment versus work and more serious responsibilities that have to be had. So the circumstances are focused more on, again, being mature and responsible and working on things versus what people are more stimulated about, more curious and want to have fun or a good time or doing a variety of different things that are more pleasurable, having distractions, that take you away from work, things like that, we might have to adjust to as we're going through Wednesday, perhaps. But then the moon is also the last aspect. The moon is opposite Jupiter. And this is big vibes, big energy here for what's going on for Wednesday night. Again, it could be all day on Wednesday, but this is Wednesday evening, Wednesday night, depending on where you live. So it's an opposition between the outer world and the inner world. And both of these signs are about safety and security, Cancer and Capricorn. Capricorn is about getting the safety and the security through working hard and taking care of business and doing what you need to do so that you have what you need. And Cancer is more about this emotional safety and security, home and family safety and security, and everything is super amplified. But the moon is ruling this Jupiter, and then that moon is ruled by Saturn. So there's still this big worldly kind of stuff here that this is talking about even on Wednesday night. So, yeah, it's mostly just difficult aspects for Wednesday. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person has to have a terrible day, but, again, this is the background for the world, and just know, things aren't as easy or comfortable, generally speaking, for people on Wednesday. So mood stuff, people's moods and stuff. Generally, people are less expressive and more serious and kind of toned down a little bit. But then we have this separate category, like I said, with Mercury in Leo and Uranus in Gemini. That's a little more bold and expressive and crazy and dramatic. All right, so that's Wednesday, and that vibe, like I said, everything I described on Wednesday kind of also carries over into Thursday on July 10th with the full moon starting to culminate from this point forward and peaking. So it's the peak of emotional energy for the past month. Everything that's been happening is coming to a head emotionally for people. But again, it's a debilitated moon. It's not as easy to deal with emotions and feelings. It's more about, let's get serious. Let's be mature and responsible about it all. But yet, on the inner life, with the sun and Jupiter in Cancer, people have some big, strong feelings and emotions that are still coming out most likely. And it could be more private though. It may be less likely to see people out in your work environment or the public that are overly emotional. I think there's still going to be cases of that because it's a full moon regardless of what sign it's in. It's still a full moon of peak emotional energy. But once you get into a more private environment, that's where the tears and the emotions are really going to be pretty strong overall. Now, the moon on Thursday, it starts off with an in conjunction to this Mercury. So again, two different vibes going on at the same time. Mercury and Leo. And there's also the moon trine Mars at the same time. And now this is first thing on Thursday morning, super early, that the moon in Capricorn having to adjust to communication, strong, bold, dramatic communications. And the moon is in Capricorn is not really into that, as I've said. It's more drier with expression, generally speaking. More serious, more mature. Kind of like how I speak, kind of in a lot of ways. I have a moon in Capricorn right here too. Versus the Leo, again, which is just more outgoing and social and self-expressive. And so adjusting the mood and circumstances, adjusting to a lot of over-the-top communications and information and media and just the way people out, around could be communicating. Or, in other cases, it could be about work projects that are still creative, that you have to work with creativity. It's generally not the best time to be like writing, publishing, broadcasting, because the mood and the communications are on two different pages. They're not really cooperating with each other and flowing. It's more best to be used in a work type of situation here because the moon has this better outlet to Mars in Virgo. This is way better for practicality, getting down to business, getting things organized, purging, purifying, working on certain projects, management stuff. That's the best use of this and kind of keeping the dramatic communications toned down or separated from, getting distracted again from media, social media, and all these things. It's better to just put your head down and work on something here for Thursday morning. Now, it is pretty early, but for other people, depending on where you live, like the East Coast and Europe will be first thing in the morning for this aspect. It could also be aligning for health. Certain health stuff is really being activated for a lot of people with the South Node in Virgo. Now Mars is really getting close to that South Node. This is all about health in a lot of ways for people too. And even this full moon could talk about a turning point, connected to health, because the moon will also be in alignment with the nodes for the full moon. And that can, again, connect to health restructuring and what you need to change around health, which is going to be an ongoing theme for the next year. So it's not just, this is just a temporary, turning point around it, perhaps. All right. So, the moon does have this connection to Mars, which could also show people can be a little more critical, especially with the in conjunction to Mercury at the same time. People could be more critical with themselves, with others, trying to do things right, though, trying to be helpful in ways, and it may not come out that way necessarily, but there's still a great potential of having good results around work stuff if you are focused. But just be a little bit careful of how you're coming across to others, or understand why others might be acting the way they are, if this is playing out, still when you're dealing with somebody in the morning on Thursday. But it could still be strong emotions, strong feelings, kind of more edgy and agitated in some cases as well. But then we reach the full moon. And that full moon is going to be at 18 degrees. Let me align it perfectly. Looks like 18 degrees, 50 minutes. Right about there. Yeah, 1850. So this is the peak, and this is going to be in the afternoon hours, evening hours for people on the East Coast, and it'll be late on Thursday night for people on in Europe, or the early morning hours, Thursday into Friday morning. So, yeah, it's a full moon on, let's just say, Thursday night. It's a big full moon in Capricorn, which is one of the more difficult full moons out of the year, generally speaking. But this full moon doesn't have a lot of major aspects, so that's good. It does have a trine to the South Node and a sextile to the North Node. So this is also a very fateful full moon in regards to work, responsibilities, all these things I was talking about for Wednesday. Work responsibilities, commitments, duties, obligations, certain things in worldly governments coming to a head. Government employees, like I said, could potentially be at a turning point, either quitting your job, losing your job, completing a job that you've been working on for the last 6 months. A project could be completing, things like that. And whatever's happening, it'll have a long-term effect for the future. It could also be a peak in certain laws that are showing coming out, laws, new rules, and the overall new systems and structures for the world, as it comes right back to Saturn on the world point stationing retrograde. It's like the world has gone as far forward in a way in this new structure and this new system that's trying to be built. It doesn't mean that there can't be additional things going on for the rest of the year, and there will be. But in the bigger context, this last 6 months has been some of the biggest new changes for the world, that we've seen in a while. And we're culminating that with this full moon. And then we have to continue for the rest of the year to be working on certain things that have already been coming out for the last 6 months. So any kind of new rules and laws, now we're kind of trying to integrate it for the next 6 months, work on these things additionally as Saturn starts to go backwards over old territory. That it's going to be stuck here. So Saturn isn't going to just instantly start moving backwards. It's going to be stuck here. It's almost at 2 degrees. It's 1 degree, 55 minutes. So it's going to be stuck here for a while until it builds up momentum backwards. And Neptune is still stationary, barely moving, just kind of stuck there. So everything about Saturn and Neptune are going to be felt very strongly during this time period with this full moon culminating. That's being ruled by this world stuff going on, but it also, like I said, comes back to individuals, your individuality, your freedom, your independence. What do you need to change for your goals and your ambitions to give you more independence for the long-term future, or a sense of more freedom for your life for the long-term future? And that also involves your home and your family life, your living situation, your foundation of life on this inner level. There's things about that that's also being illuminated for you to see and understand with this full moon. So it involves all three of these areas. And then just naturally, because all three of these cardinal signs, anything in the cardinal signs also affects Libra, which is relationships too. So, but again, this is not the time of year that relationships are the priority. Once we get to the fall and Libra season, that's going to be much more about others and trying to, including others and trying to find a better balance with others. And then we can still have that on some level, on a secondary level. But the priority is the self, honestly. That's just the reality of it. Self and home and family are the two main priorities in this particular phase. And now work, goals, ambitions, and all that is really connected to it as well, and what needs to change in order for these two areas, the self and home and family, to get what we need in a bigger way for the future. So, this was the full moon last year that Biden dropped out of the the presidential stuff. So that's usually how it happens. There's always, usually on a Capricorn full moon, there's like certain high level people that resign or lose their jobs. It may not happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some sort of announcement of somebody losing their position in a government role. But, we may not see it in the USA. It could be in any country around the world. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens that we don't see. Like there's things that happen with the astrology every week that we don't necessarily see on the news. Just because it's not on the news doesn't mean it's not happening all around the world in different ways. But there's likely still to be things that come out as well on the national level and even worldly level that we do become aware of, I would imagine. So, yeah, again, look back at your last 6 months. What have you been working on for the past 6 months? Have you had any personal goals and ambitions that you've been working towards, or a project or something you're trying to achieve? This is kind of the point where you have to look at that and where do you stand with that? Do you still want to achieve that? If you haven't yet, is that still something that you want? Maybe it's not. Because again, this is about change. What needs to change? What turning point are you at around goals, ambitions, projects, work, and things like that? Where do you stand with your responsibilities, in life? Are you willing to be committed to certain things that you've been committed to? Do you feel like you're not free because you have a certain duty and obligation in certain ways? Again, even some of those obligations could be family obligations. Where do you stand with certain things like that? Again, this is a full moon that's culminating those types of vibes to be recognized, to be very in our face and full, and at a turning point. So full moon is about things that are ending or starting, and it could be both or one or the other. What needs to end? What is done? Look at that, but do it in a way that's mature. You don't want to just be overly impulsive either, because I think that this impulsiveness with Uranus and Gemini is going to start building up for people's radical thoughts, radical ideas that they want to take action on, so you still have to also be a little cautious of being overly impulsive in this new era, overly dramatic and overly rebellious, because a lot of unconscious people driven by things unconsciously will be acting those types of things out in the world from this point forward. Just know that the streets are going to be crazy from this point forward. What's out in the environment, the local environment, the streets, the media, and overall it's going to create a lot of changes, as I've said before. This is going to be the very beginning over this next several years of some major corporate media changes. There's some big stuff that's going to be going through revolutionary changes in regard to media and information, social media changes, and the streets. Like I've said before, new technology is going to start to show more and more around transportation and traveling. There's even new flight technology that's coming out more and more. So it's like, again, that's such a separate vibe from this Capricorn energy that's more traditional, more serious, more mature, more, this drier energy versus this mentally really kind of dramatic vibe with it being ruled by Mercury here. So that's a big part of how I'm looking at this full moon. Again, check your chart. Do you have any personal planets at, let's just say 17, 18, 19 degrees? Those are going to be the strongest. It doesn't mean that 20 or 21 or 16 degrees isn't also affected, but I kind of give it like a 3-degree orb. So just say 17, 18, 19 degrees of the cardinal signs. If you have any in the cardinal signs at those degrees, this full moon is really activating your personal life in some way. And again, it could be about, is certain relationships going to be affected by whatever's coming to a head, or yourself, your freedom, your independence, your individuality, or your home, your living situation, your family environment, real estate, business stuff. You're likely to see more of this being relevant for you if you do have personal planets roughly around 18 to 19 degrees of Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, or Libra. And then generally, we all have, even if you have no planets in Capricorn, we all have an area of our life that's Capricorn. And wherever that area of your life is that's Capricorn, that's where things are more serious in your life, more traditional, that have an older energetic to it in that area. So generally, again, it's about work and career and the public and all that area. But it could be different for you depending on your personal chart. And I'm not going to go off of rising signs because not every person that has the same rising sign has the same signs and houses. So you'll have to just look at your own personal chart and kind of get to know your own chart. And I think a lot of you that watch my videos are more into astrology. You're not, if you're a very beginner, then you may not know what I'm talking about, but that's fine. So if you do know your chart, just look where you have Capricorn. That's where everything is culminating. That's where something is completing, ending, or starting and changing, basically. And it's going to affect a lot of different areas of life because these are the powerful cardinal signs. But, I'm not going to lie. It can be a heavy full moon. It can be serious. It's being ruled by Saturn. That's overly amplified now as it's starting to station retrograde. So people can feel the pressure, the stress, the worry. This can also bring up fears, a lot of fears for certain people. Don't let yourself get sucked into all that. This is a moon that asks for maturity, to be more practical, be more logical, get grounded, earthly about things. Don't get sucked up into emotions and fear and worry for no reason. Worrying about the future is not going to be helpful. You got to look at things in a mature way and say, what do I need to do for the future to be better for me? You have to take responsibility. That's another part of all this. People having to take responsibility for themselves. It's not about the blame game and it's everybody else's fault. It's about, how you put yourself into certain situations, how you got there, and taking the responsibility, learning the lessons from certain things so you don't put yourself in difficult situations for the future. All right, so again, that's how I'm looking at this full moon. All right, and yeah, it's really about safety and security on multiple levels. Money, resources, home and family stuff, property, real estate, business stuff could be coming to a head in certain ways. I think that'll be even more so if there's any kind of like home projects or property stuff that's in process. I think that the Cancer full moon during Capricorn season will really bring those things to a head in, roughly 5 to 6 months from now. But this could also be even starting a goal and an ambition about home or property stuff as well that could take the next 6 months to achieve as well in some cases. All right, so that's what I'm seeing for Thursday. Full moon vibes. And those full moon vibes continue, but things are going to get intense because it's a full moon, for one. And also the moon is going to be building towards Pluto, the conjunction of Pluto. So there will be a sense of transformation that comes from this full moon as well. Move this to the hour. All right, moving forward, those are the main aspects. Again, it's connected to the nodes of fate as well. So whatever happens around all this stuff I talked about, again, could have a long-term effect on the future. I think it also connects to work, service, and health life too, though. And that's definitely a part of things for people, especially health, and for certain individuals with Mars going through here, and this full moon says you can also create changes around health stuff and management and daily life routines and just how you take care of yourself, and all those types of things could also be affected by this full moon in positive ways when you take the initiative to make things better. Or temporary health stuff could be coming to a head, even though there's still a bigger process generally for people for the whole year. All right, so moving this forward, that's Thursday on the full moon until we get to Friday on July 11th, and this is when there's a lot of easier aspects going on, actually, but it's still kind of right next to Pluto. The moon right next to Pluto is still a Capricorn moon. And even when the moon comes into Aquarius, it's being ruled by Saturn. So it's still all about Saturn as we're going through the end of the week here. It's all week long, but it's definitely at the end of the week as well. Again, everything about Saturn, maturity, serious stuff, responsibilities, commitments, duties, obligations, fear, worry, or a sense of restriction and limitation, and where you stand with that, what you need to do to change to get away from that sense of restriction and limitation in some cases. But as we come into Friday, the moon is squaring Chiron first thing. And so it brings up emotional sensitivities, vulnerabilities, things in the world that could be, difficult, injuries, accidents for people, wounds, and just, not feeling very comfortable in some way, generally speaking. And then things are getting intensified. The full moon vibes will kind of carry over into Friday, really, and be very intense and powerful on Friday as well. And there'll be a big mood change, though. Once we get to later on in the morning, the moon is going to change signs and ingress Aquarius. But still, it's next to Pluto, and it's being ruled by Saturn stationing retrograde. But right as the moon comes into Aquarius, it is a mood change. And this is where people need to get a hold of their emotions and their feelings in a different way. Be more intellectual about it, be more objective about it, and detach. But with Pluto here, there can either be strong emotions and feelings that are kind of extreme, or it can be an extreme detachment too for some people. Really separating yourself, and people's emotions and feelings now are not necessarily what everybody else expects. Now, from this point forward, there is a lot of trines available. There's more cooperation in one way where things are flowing well together, but it's also the new world, the new era that's really being highlighted here. You can see this. This is the minor grand trine between Gemini, Aries, and Aquarius. This new world with the outer planets are all being highlighted by the moon and circumstances. So this is a glimpse as well of the future and what the world is kind of turning into more and more. But as the moon comes in to Aquarius, it's more about the group, the friends, and the community. So this is much more about outer life. These are fire and air signs, the masculine signs, about what's outward. Of course, we still have the inward vibes of where the spotlight is with Cancer, but there's a lot of outward stuff here. Plus Mercury and Leo, very, very slow, which adds some issues. We could start to see some technical issues as well, potentially. I would say it's possible there could be some things that break or glitches in some systems. Everything mercurial, there could be some issues with communication, with traveling. There could be some just some glitches in electronical stuff perhaps in some cases. And that could be going on for the rest of this week and next week as well, as Mercury starts to get really slow and prepare to station retrograde. But now markets are going to be more volatile as well in this particular case, because Venus, the value of things, are in Gemini, being ruled by Mercury, which is pretty much slowing down to stop. So I think the bigger picture is still positive overall for the markets, generally speaking, but there's going to be some issues here and there. I'll get more into markets later. I'll look more into all that. So I don't want to speak too much on it right now, but just know that the value of things, money and resources, have a connection to Mercury in this particular phase, which isn't normally the case. All right, so as the moon comes into Aquarius, again, it's more about groups, friends, and community and social stuff that's starting to really pick up for Friday and into the weekend. But that can start to get pretty intense as well, as the moon is next to Pluto. But the moon is also making this connection to Uranus, new ideas. So group and community and friendships connected to new thoughts and new ideas and communications and media in these new ways. Again, people acting upon new thoughts and new ideas that could be radical, revolutionary. A lot of revolutionary talk and communications could be coming out in bigger ways, in the world context in different places, different groups of people, organizations. And this is also super technology stuff, technology and science and new ways, that could be showing in certain cases as well. But it's still a minor grand trine, and this new world, it comes right back to Saturn stationing retrograde on the world point, the apex of this. So it still comes back to worldly stuff here, so it's also obviously about politics is going to be really amplified from this point forward. Just a lot of this intensity within politics and group and community stuff. But on a individual level, again, it could really stimulate more about friendships and your own group of friends and community in your local area as well, or online or stuff like that. Now, since we've had this Pluto in Aquarius, we've seen some of the biggest events when there's Leo transits opposing Pluto. I think that Mercury is pretty far away from it. I see it more when it's within a few degrees opposite Pluto. But that's when we get radical events from people that are more radicalized and extremists doing radical things. So it may be a little bit activated here on Friday into the weekend, some extremist stuff. But I think there's going to be even stronger potential when the sun, the new moon, is opposite Pluto. That's going to be a cycle that really activates some extremist type of activity in the future here coming up in late July and August. But it's possible it could be a little bit activated here even on Friday into the Saturday or the weekend in general. But we do have a lot of flowing aspects, like I said. So the moon connected to Uranus in a better way, more open to change and changes of thoughts and things. And then the moon is sextile Saturn. It's just that, again, the moon in Aquarius is not the typical moon phase for people. So emotions and feelings are not being expressed in ways that we would expect normally. And people can just, there's a need for freedom and independence here, basically. You're connecting to a lot of these positions that want some sort of new freedom for the self. So doing things that, people are a little more radical, it could be. So just expect groups of people, maybe more protests, maybe more immigration stuff out in the streets in new ways, things like that, or just organizations being activated in groups of people going through intensity and transformation. And just general circumstances are going through transformation as the moon is conjunct Pluto. But everything is intensified and a little bit extreme for the mood and the feelings and the circumstances. in different ways. I think media, it's probably going to show a lot on media and social media because of the Uranus and Gemini connection. But we do get that'll be the following day. So we get the sun here on Friday, also connected to the nodes of fate. So it's a fateful day, whatever's happening here on Friday. It's going to have a long-term effect on the future. It has connections to things that are behind the scenes that aren't necessarily visible. It could also activate things about conspiracy theories, scandalous things. It's also connected to, like I said, health and work and service stuff. That could have a long-term effect on the future based on whatever's happening here. And the root is the homeland, safety, security things, immigration, and all of that, your inner life and home and family life. So just know it's a fateful day, but it's just more flowing and maybe, see, it's a little bit, these are like some pretty powerful connections, but they're all trines. So typically trines are going to show things aren't as crazy and radical happening, but yet there's always a potential because it's Pluto, it's Uranus, it's Saturn and Neptune. So it could go either way. It still feels like, basically when I see trines like this, it's like it can be for good or bad, but it's like there's not going to be a block to anything that's trying to happen for good or bad. So if somebody has a negative agenda, something that's like an extremism type of event, they're not going to be blocked or stopped. They're going to be able to do it. Or now there's some exceptions to that once in a while, but generally it's just more like everything is flowing for good or bad, basically. So I'll leave it at that. And then the moon is in conjunct to Jupiter as well. So emotions and feelings, everything about this Cancer, it goes through these changes wherever the moon is. So even the home and the family vibes and the immigration vibes and all this inner stuff really starts to change with the moon in Aquarius. Emotions are trying to change the way people are feeling and expressing emotions. It's the oddball sign. Don't expect it's not traditional. It's different, with people's emotional responses, basically. So adjusting to the group, the friends, the community, the outward life, the intensity in the world versus home and family and safety, security. And that's what we have for Friday till we get to the weekend on Saturday, July 12th. And the first aspect, early morning hours on Saturday, is the moon trine Venus. So this is where there's a better connection for the mood and the circumstances, the feelings and pleasure and relationships. But it's Aquarius and Gemini. It's up in the head. It's more intellectual, objective, and detached a little more. So it's not the most intimate connections going on here. It's more about social and friendship stuff and community stuff this weekend. So there's still a connection to people and having better connections to people, generally speaking, in a relationship. But it's just not, it's more about communicating and social outward life. It's not so much the inner personal stuff as much. All right, but it's still a good connection. And there can be a better sense of feeling more fulfilled and satisfied, generally speaking, with pleasurable things early in the morning. So late Friday into Saturday morning, but that's still a radical area. So be cautious if you are out on Friday night into Saturday morning. Be very careful of your surroundings. Know your surroundings, because there can still be a lot of intensity. All right, and then Saturday doesn't look like the easiest day. This is where the moon is also opposing this Mercury, which is almost stopped. It's slowing down, barely moving here. So it's a very social aspect, though. I do think there's social events most likely this weekend that you're going to be seeing. So again, it could be protest. It could be things with immigration stuff that are really amplified. And in other cases, maybe it could be some fun. Leo, this Mercury in Leo would like to have some fun, recreational things, social, outward, enjoying yourself, a good time, vibes. I think there's the potential for that in some cases. And then the moon is also in conjunct to Mars, though. So there's still a little bit of criticalness going on, mental criticalness, and then it's still a little bit dramatic perhaps. But usually this opposition is super social. So it can be for good or bad depending on the individual chart for you. But in the general background, it doesn't look as easy, because this is also when Saturn is officially stationing, and Saturn is just super amplified. And Saturn is not the funnest energetic of the zodiac. It's serious, it's intense, it's a downer a little bit. It's heavy about responsibilities and duties and fear and worry. Don't let that get out of hand. Take charge. Don't let your emotions get out of hand about things. I think it's easier, with the emotions to be detached, though, with this moon in Aquarius. And people are pretty communicative and bold and a little bit dramatic. And I think that there is a social vibe that can be good. So don't get me wrong. I don't think it has to be negative for every single person in the whole world. If you have any plans this weekend to have a good time, embrace it. But there's going to be this background Saturn that people are likely going to be feeling. Despite if they're having fun or a good time in the moment, there's this background pressure, that's happening. So as Saturn starts to station retrograde, it's like, again, we've gone as far forward on this world stage around new rules, new laws, new structures and systems that are trying to be built, and dissolving away the old systems and structures and rules and laws that have been happening very quickly over this last 6 months or so. And now it's like all these things are kind of amplified about where we stand. It's kind of the same as the full moon vibes that are kind of still in place, carried over with all this about reaching this culmination point. But now we have to change. So there's been a lot of outward new structures and systems and laws and rules, and now we're going to start to work on more private internal new structures and systems that go along with the outer, as Saturn is going retrograde. Now, this is an instant, of course. This is going to be over the next several months that we're working on this more internal process of structuring and going back over things that we've already been, changing around structures and things that we've been building and working on. There's still more work to be done on those things. They're not fully complete until we get to next year and beyond. And then your sense of duty and responsibilities and commitments are somehow starting to shift, and where you stand with those certain things. You might need to take responsibility for the self more and more from this point forward. And if you want outer life changes to happen, well, you better start working on the inner stuff that affects the outer, from this point forward as well. And then the moon is in conjunct to the south node. We're still having to adjust to all this Virgo side of the chart. Health things could be affecting circumstances for certain people. And Mars is getting so close to that south node. It is a fateful vibe here in this Virgo area. Wherever you have Virgo, there's a lot of changes in that area. There's restructuring, there's reorganizing, there's purifying, purging going on that we're having to adjust to versus the outward life. Our work stuff also affecting group and friend community stuff on Saturday. And that's what we have for Saturday. Again, it looks a little challenging overall, but there's still a very strong social dynamic. And then Sunday, July 13, whoa, I'm kind of going slow here, I guess. Gotta speed up. All right, so on Sunday, July 13, the moon is still in Aquarius. We just have a few aspects here. The moon is in conjunct to the sun, so this is where the inner and the outer lights are on two different pages. Again, the sun is more about safety, security, being cautious and guarded, home and family, your inner world versus the outer world and your social environment and politics and just all the intensity out in the world. There's two different kind of influences that we're picking up on and adjusting to on Sunday. And then the moon is sextile Chiron, connecting to, again, injuries, wounds with group and community. It could be humanitarian causes or something going on there on Sunday or around those days. the moon will then change signs. So the moon will be in Aquarius for most of the day until we get to the evening hours, and then the moon changes signs into Pisces. And that's going to be a big mood change by Sunday evening and Sunday night. But now we have something very new and very different that we're picking up on for Pisces that we haven't had before, and that's the square from Uranus to Pisces now. Again, all the mutable signs, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, are all being affected in a radical new era for the next several years with this new transit. And those signs are going to be changing in a more of a very different type of way. But it all depends on the degrees that you have in those signs. So the first degrees get it first, and then year by year, the later degrees get it more and more. So if you have 0 degrees, you're really affected. 0 to 1 degrees, you're really affected by this Uranus transit. But the moon comes in here to Pisces and things get more sensitive. It's more about behind the scenes. It's more energetically picking up on all the feelings of everybody else and the environment and the world. You have to be guarded. You have to lay down some good boundaries here as you come into Sunday night and next week. There's a need for escapism tendencies and just a lot of stuff that's happening more privately behind the scenes, but then at first being affected by what's out in the streets, the local environment, communications and media, and a little bit of a radical vibe as the moon is squaring Uranus, unpredictability, disruptions, changes that are happening for Sunday night. It could be on just a mood level for people, mood swings, mood changes. It could be in circumstances that are a little bit unpredictable and disruptive in some way. Transportation, traveling could be a little bit of an issue here, potentially. News and information could be coming out in some way that's disruptive. Technology stuff, like I said, there could be glitches in technology. There could be power issues in some cases. So that will mellow out perhaps, but at first it gets triggered right as the moon comes in here and squares Uranus. And now the circumstances are no longer ruled by this Saturn. Now the circumstances are ruled by Jupiter. So now we have more water again. You know, it could be also stormy stuff going on again in certain places, but it's more emotional. It's more sensitive and intuitive and more private and guarded and behind the scenes in your inner world. From this point forward, it comes back to Jupiter. And now there's another mutual reception between these two areas, Pisces and Cancer areas. So they're working together, you know. So again, it's just more inward and private from this point forward and sensitive. All right. And then we get to Monday on July 14. The moon is still going through Pisces in this mutual reception with Jupiter, and it's connecting to Jupiter. So this is big feelings, big emotions. And there's just a better opportunity to feel like you could get nurtured or get something that you want or need, but it's private. You know, it's more behind the scenes and private, or in your home environment or something for Monday early morning hours. And that's the only easy aspect of the day, is that trine between moon and Jupiter, because for the rest of the day, the moon is squaring Venus, and that's a sense of relationships aren't as easy. In fact, there's a T-square building up now. So Venus and Mars are now at odds with each other from this point forward that the moon activates. Venus-Mars square, that's make love or make war. They're on 2 different pages. The feminine and the masculine are on 2 different pages. Mars and Virgo. Now, what's interesting, though, both of these signs of Venus and Mars, the lovers, they're under the rulership of Mercury, which has reached its retrograde degree, 15 degrees. So it's going to be stuck here for the first part of the week, of next week here, before it officially turns retrograde. So relationships are going to start to be affected in some new way by next week. There's going to be some tension building up. There could be tension for good in some cases, you know, some romantic tension that you could use, but it's the aspect of make love or make war. So try to do your best to channel it into more positive dynamics, but it can also be bold and a little dramatic because it's being ruled by Mercury and Leo, and the moon is just totally at odds with both of these. You know, the moon is super sensitive in Pisces, picking up on this square to Venus that wants to communicate, that's a little more fickle and changeable and, not as serious, not as deep and emotional. And the moon is more emotional. So they're at odds with each other. It can be hurt feelings easily on Monday, late morning, afternoon hours. So be careful. Don't, be careful being too hypersensitive or something, and words and what's being said. And then it just may be a little more challenging to feel content and satisfied with whatever's going on here in general. And then money, financial dynamics could be a little bit volatile here on Monday as well, I would imagine. And then Mars, it's just more critical in Virgo. It's more judgmental. So Pisces moon can be super sensitive about judgments and people being overly critical or judgmental in some cases. And Mars wants to narrow the focus, get down to the details. And Gemini is scattered all over the place with Venus. The preferences, changeable. And the moon is just kind of lost in its own world and energetically picking up on everything. And, so mutable T-square is usually messy and scattered and all over the place. So that's Monday. All day Monday, that's going to be a main energetic. And the moon is in conjunct to the Mercury at the same time in between all this. So adjusting to this more sensitive, behind-the-scenes vibe versus this more bold, dramatic, expressive communication going on at the same time. So it can really bring up scandals and conspiracies on the world level. It can bring up traveling and transportation issues. There could be all kinds of stuff that's just a little bit messy and all over the place here for Monday. And then the last aspect is the moon opposing Mars. So things are critical, emotionally critical. Circumstances could be a little critical. Communications, judgments, health issues. So that's what I have for you, folks. These are the dynamics that we go up and down with every week in different ways. So it's just life, the ups and downs of life. Individuals can still be fine. It all depends on if this aligns with your chart. If you have a lot of mutable around the middle of the degrees, then you might be wrapped up into this as well. But this is just the background for what's going on in the world. All right, so that's what I have for you. Thanks for watching. I hope it's helpful, and have a good week. Take good care.